Hello and welcome back to Music Theory with Mr. Teachey. Today we are going to expand our palette or our arsenal, depending on how you think about writing music. We're going to be expanding that collection of chords to include the predominant chords, or at least one predominant chord. Today we're going to talk about four. Now notice in my writing of four here, I have both the capital Roman numerals and the lowercase Roman numerals. That is because in major key areas, 4 is a major chord, whereas in minor key areas, 4 is a minor chord. So today we're going to look at both major 4 and minor 4 so that we really know what we're talking about when we're talking about the 4 chord. Now, what do I mean by predominant chords? So far we have talked specifically about tonic and dominant when we're talking about cadences, right? We've gone over the full cadence and we've gone over the half cadence. The full cadence is where 5 goes to 1. A dominant chord goes to a tonic chord. A half cadence is where a tonic chord goes to a dominant chord. Now we're going to talk about what happens when a tonic chord goes somewhere but doesn't go directly to a dominant chord. In that way, the predominant chords are basically these intermediary chords, or the chords that go in between tonic and dominant. So if you're leaving tonic but you're not quite ready to get to dominant yet, you go to predominant. You go to like a staging area to the dominant chord. What these predominant chords tend to do is intensify the establishment of the tonic, because they are chords that are not tonic function chords that are still sort of reiterating the idea of that tonic. And what I mean by that is it's sort of like getting a recommendation letter. When someone wants a recommendation letter from you, they don't want you to recommend yourself. They want you to get someone else who will recommend you. And in that way, it's sort of like a chord that isn't the tonic saying, but yeah, that's still the tonic though. Hopefully that makes sense. Another thing that they do is delay the arrival of cadences. What I mean by that is that, let's say you're finding your music moving a little too fast. Your harmonic rhythm is too quick. You're getting to the cadence and resolving from dominant to tonic too quickly. And so you want to throw something in there to slow that down, to build a little more tension. What you can do is add a predominant chord. So in that way, the predominant chords are a sort of scenic route. It's like you already know for certain you are going from tonic to dominant. That's decided. No doubt about it. But what if you don't want to get there too quickly? What you can do is add a pit stop or a predominant in between your departure from tonic and your arrival at dominant. It doesn't have to be back-to-back, tonic to dominant. You can add that pit stop in there, that predominant, in order to delay your arrival. Now, of course, once you get to dominant, dominants go back to tonic. That's what they do. So far, that's what we've learned, is that the dominant's role is to get you back to tonic somehow. It's an uncomfortable space where you gotta jump back to that tonic. So in that way, the predominant is really just a stop along the way to dominant, which is why we call it a predominant. It is definitely not a post-dominant. The post-dominant is the tonic. And that already has a name, so that's why you never hear about a post-dominant. So now that we know what the predominant 4 is, let's use it in writing some music. I have here a bass line that goes 1, 4, 5, 1. And so I'm going to say that those scale degrees are going to outline my 1 to 4 to 5 to 1 progression. So strictly root chords in this piece of music. So that'll make it easy for me to add in a soprano line. And for my soprano line, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to go 1, 1. So this is oblique motion here. We've got a descent by a fifth, which is a pretty strong motion in the bass. But the soprano line is staying on a common tone, which is 1 there. And then I'm going to go to 7. And then I'm going to go back to 1. So we've got a contrary motion here, stepwise in both the bass and the soprano, which is like, that's a good move. And then we've got, this is a similar motion, but it's by step in the soprano line, so we're going to say it's fine. Now if I fill in the rest of the voices here, I can go 5 in the alto. Let's see, what would 5 be? Let's call that C. Then 6, yeah. Then 5 again. And then I think what we'll do is go to 3 here. Now notice that I'm descending 5 to 3 here, which is not ideal, but I think we'll get away with it. Let's hear how it sounds when we finish up. So then I'm gonna, let's see, I've got my 1, I've got a 5 here, which means I need my 3 in my tenor part. So what would that be? That would be A. Then I'll go up to 4. Then I'll go back down to 3. No, I'll go down to 2. This is something else that I wanted to talk about, and I'll come back to it in just a moment. But then I'll finish up on 1. 2 to 1. So 7 up to 8, 7 to 1, right? Then 5 to 3, not ideal, but something that we'll consider. 5 to 1 we like, and then 2 to 1 we also like. So that's fine, this resolution 5 to 1. So notice this tenor voice here, we're going from 4 to 2. And the reason we have to do that, the reason we have to have that descending third, is because otherwise we would be going 4 to 5 in the case of 2 triads, right? That 4 to 5 is no good because we've got a 4 to 5 in the bass. So that would be a parallel octave, and we don't like that. That doesn't sound good to us. So instead we're going to go descending third, 4, 2. Now let's say alternatively, this is no longer a root position 5 chord, 5 triad. Let's say instead this is becoming a 5/7 chord, which means that we have the so the chordal 7th in that dominant 5 chord. That chordal 7th is the 4th scale degree, right? So we've got, it's 5, 7, 2, 4. We've got the 4th scale degree. So in that case, this 4 we could keep on as a common tone, which would then mean that we have to resolve this to 3, right? Because 4 resolves down to 3. And then we don't want 2/3 here, so probably we would, instead of going 5 down to 3, we would keep this a 5. So we've got A, C, F, F. That works out really nicely. Cool. But as I was saying, we need to, we can hold this 4 as a common tone between the 4 chord and the 5/7 chord. Now, what if instead of going from the root position 4 chord to the root position 5/7 chord, what if we want to make this a little bit fancier and go from the root position 4 chord to a third inversion 5/7 chord, that dominant 7th chord? We can do that. What it means is that instead of having our 4 on as a common tone here in the tenor voice, we're going to have 4 as a common tone in the bass voice. So there we go. Then this, of course, will become 5. We'll probably want to keep the 5 in the tenor voice instead. So then probably the way that we would want to resolve this 5/4/2 chord, we've got a little bit of a mess here now that we've adjusted these voices. This 4, we probably want to resolve to a 3. Not just probably, I'm pretty certain we want to resolve that 4 to a 3 because it is the chordal 7th, and we always want to go 4 to 3 when we resolve, if possible. So we end up with a first inversion tonic triad because we've got A in the bass. This 4 is resolving down to a 3. So then we are left with the question, what do we do with the other chord tones? We've got kind of a mess because we've been adjusting voices here. So we have ended up with this interesting situation here where we have a third inversion dominant 7th chord, except we do not have the chordal 5th. We are missing the chordal 5th, and when you have a dominant 7th chord, you cannot omit any chord tones when you are in an inversion. So this is a third inversion chord. We have to have all of the chord tones, or else we do not have the chord that we think we have. So I'm going to change this C to a G. So now we have our chordal 5th again. So we've got C, where's C? C, E, G, B. So let's see how we resolve it. We might end up with a little bit of a mess here. So let's see what we end up with. We are, of course, going to be resolving this third inversion dominant 7th chord to a first inversion tonic triad, because that's just good voice leading. We're going to end up moving this 4 down to a 3. Here is our 2. We're going to move it down to a 1. Here is our 5. We can keep this on as a common tone if we want. Here's our 7, and we will move it up to an 8. And that looks good to me. So let's see what we got here. Let's have a listen. Cool. Now, what if this were, instead of in a major key, what if this were in a minor key? So here we have that same 1 to 4 to 5 to 1 chord progression from earlier, except now we are looking at it in the minor key. Now the changes that you have to make when you're in a minor key, things that you have to consider anyway, are that your 7th scale degree is typically going to be sharpened when you are approaching the tonic from the dominant, right? Which is the case here. We've got this 5 chord, this root position dominant triad. Our chordal 3rd, or the scale degree 7, is not a C natural, which is what would be in the key signature. Instead, we have raised this scale degree 7 by 1/2 step so that we have the leading tone. Now, when you do that, you have to keep in mind that if there is a 6 in front of that 7, so in this case, we don't have the 6 in front of the 7, we have the 1 in front of the 7. But if this were a 6, because we were not paying attention and we were doing some bad voice leading, then we would have to fix that, right? Because this then becomes an augmented 2nd. And the way that sounds is like this. I personally love the augmented 2nd. I find it so interesting. I love it anytime I get a chance to hear and write and work with an augmented 2nd. That being said, Mozart, not a fan of the augmented 2nd, nor was Bach. And these are the guys who are sort of making our conventions for us when we are doing our counterpoint. So the rule against that augmented 2nd when you're doing your melodic intervals means that you cannot approach 7 from 6 in your minor voice leading. Instead, you have to approach 7 from above. That way you avoid that augmented 2nd. So as long as this is a 1, this is okay. If this is a 6, we have a problem. Other than that, basically the same rules when you are working with your predominant 4 chord. So I think we can wrap this up. The next time we see each other, we will be talking about the 2 chord, the predominant 2 chord, and that chord is minor in a major key, and it is diminished in a minor key. So that's going to be very interesting. I look forward to it. I hope you do too. See you next time. Bye.